Hi, I'm Chaplain Larry Crabtree with the St. Mary's County Sheriff's Office and the Maryland State Police.
And I'm Chaplain Charlie Wharton with the St. Mary's County Sheriff's Office. Larry, we've been talking about marriage and relationships and the connection that we have with those people that are closest to us. I want to lead us into a discussion that really is academic because it never comes up in any of our relationships, and that's money. Let's talk about money. I'm sure that nobody here has any issues. Everybody has more money than they know what to do with, and I would imagine that everybody agrees on what is important about money.
Yeah, and what world are you from? But true. I mean, money is a real issue. In fact, you talk to Citibank, you talk to any financial institution, and it is widely known that the #1 cause of divorce in the United States of America is because of money. Money fights, money issues, and disagreement over money. And so since this is such a incredibly impacting component of marriage, it's something we need to address, and I think would be helpful to just deal with some aspects of how we can overcome this #1 issue of destruction of relationships. Now, we're not going to go real deep into this because, I mean, this can be a broad and very in-depth study. In fact, there are courses that you can go over many months to deal with all these money issues. But some of the basic things to remember, if we're going to relate with money, is that first we have to realize that the way we use money and the way we spend money represents the value system of your family and of that relationship. In other words, if you're able to take a checkbook, and I doubt many people use checkbooks anymore, it's usually online, Quicken, whatever it is that you do, your bank statement, pretty much by looking at your bank statement, I can tell what it is your family most values and what it is you prioritize, because that's where you're going to invest your money. And unfortunately, in a lot of relationships, those values are not the same. And that's what causes tremendous disagreement and fights over how money is used and how it is spent. And so since that's the case, I think, again, like everything, we have to be intentional with how we're going to deal with money as a couple. And so I want to just give a couple of, or a few, basic areas that we can use to overcome these financial disagreements. And the first one is this. I would call it that every couple needs to have an emergency fund. Now, you might think that this is rather ridiculous. In fact, most men, when you talk about something like having an emergency fund, they think it's not necessary, it's kind of peripheral. But again, men and women are very different. And I don't know, I know relationships are maybe different today than they were 50 years ago. There's women and women and, men and men. But again, we can't overlook the fact that men and women have some basic differences. And when it comes to a financial area, women do tend to have, I think, I have to laugh. Dave Ramsey says they have this special gland that's kind of down here somewhere, and that gland is connected directly to their face. And when they feel like there isn't a sense of financial security or a nest egg that's sitting there, that gland begins to fire out of control and it contorts their face in an incredible way. And they find a sense of security in that. Now, by the way, I want to say this. Women tend to deal with financial problems much better than men do. In fact, they're much more resilient in financial crisis, which is very interesting. But we tend to see that women tend to also desire that security of a net that's there. And so financial planners that have been studying this and see this recommend that every family should have an emergency fund of 3 to 6 months of income that just sits there. And you don't use it for anything. It's there for an emergency. In fact, they say don't use it for an emergency even when an emergency comes up unless you absolutely have to, because that's there as that sense of security. And again, women find that incredibly helpful. And so that takes away some stresses in relationships. And again, for police, this is significant because particularly as you begin your careers, let's face it, law enforcement officers are not paid large salaries. When you compare the amount of hours they have to invest and what they have to do, they start out at a relatively low scale. And over the years, that certainly can increase in most parts of the country. But again, still having that little nest egg there, that would be your number one financial priority, to have that little safety net. The second thing is you need to start living by a budget, because a budget is how you're going to flush out your value system and get it aligned. Now, a lot of question goes into, well, who should prepare the budget? Should the husband or the wife? Should this individual or that individual? The answer is simple. Who's the biggest nerd in the family? Who's the one that likes to sit down and crunch numbers? And typically, the way relationships work, you're going to have someone that tends to be very detail-oriented. They love the minutia. They love Excel. And they like 14 tabs on a spreadsheet, and they just eat that up, and they can live on that all day. And then you've got the other spouse, the other partner. They could care less about spreadsheets and columns and where they go. I mean, they're there to do the wave and everything else. They love partying and all that kind of thing. So the one that should prepare a budget is the one that's more into the nitty-gritty. Let them do that. And and by the way, what is a budget? We mean you're going to have to take the amount of money that's coming in on a weekly, monthly, annual basis, and you actually spend that money on paper before you actually spend it, so every number is accounted for. Now remember, it has to balance. So it has to be the amount of money that comes in is going to be subtracted by, you're only going to spend that much on a sheet of paper. We're not going to be a United States government that does not have a balanced budget, okay, or you're going to have problems. But once that budget is made, take your spouse, sit down, and take that budget, hand it over to them, and let them look at it and have input. And come to an agreement, okay, is this good? Your spouse may say, I don't know, that seems a little high on the green fees at the golf course. $400 a month seems a little extreme when we have $50 for food. Maybe we should change that. So the point is that, okay, you adjust those numbers, but you come to an agreement on that. But the point is, whoever is going to actually sit down and make that budget, you're going to come to an agreement, you're going to pinky swear, and you're going to agree that's our budget, and we're going to live within that budget. Because now you have a written agreement of a value system of where things are going. And so I know that sounds boring, that sounds maybe insignificant and too much trouble, but again, remember, what's the number one cause of divorce in America? It's money problems. And so it's trying to come to that agreed value system, and a budget is one of the best ways to do that. So two things really keep in mind. Get an emergency fund, 3 to 6 months. Probably for most people you're talking about at maybe $15,000. That's just sitting there for those absolute emergency situations. And have a budget that you live by. And account for vacations and all of those other things, movies and entertainment and food and health and clothes and everything you're going to spend money on, and come to an agreement on that. And that will help alleviate a tremendous amount of money conflict and problems.
I've heard, you alluded to this just a second ago, that money is a huge issue. Is it money, or is it personalities and belief systems and thought processes, and maybe a lack of communication? A lot of these other things that we've talked about, it just manifests itself in the black and white, or maybe the black and red.
Yeah, money is just a thing. I mean, it's an object, so it's going to be the way that we each look at it. And again, it comes down to value systems, what each individual considers most important. One might find clothing and fashion extremely important. The other thinks that's a tremendous waste of money.
Because you can buy more guns if you don't have to spend money on clothes.
There you go. Or a no bass boat, or whatever it might be. Well, your spouse doesn't think that's the case. So on and on it goes. So it's a matter of coming to an agreement on how we divvy up these funds that we have, and that helps alleviate the kind of conflicts that arise, because we do have different values and different way of thinking and prioritizing things.
All right. Again, just another example of some things that can be done that are relatively simple when you sit down and you do them together inside the family.
But if you don't do something, I'll pretty much guarantee you, you're going to have some pain. There's going to be some conflict.
Thanks for joining us again for this segment. We hope that there has been something that has been brought up in not only in this segment, but also in this series that is making things a little bit easier for you at home. And as we tend to do, we want to sign off with our familiar encouragement. Be safe.
And be strong.